Hello, everyone, and welcome to a one-player, one-shot here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. It is the last week of October. I didn't really have anything planned for this. I wasn't sure how many games I was going to be able to get in recording-wise for this month, because I usually do some bonus spooky episodes for October. We've been doing this on the DMs After Dark feed for years. Pretty much every year we do at least one spooky one-shot and try and do a few extra little spooky one-shots and things like that, try and lean into the horror flavor. And I always have big goals for doing this, but this year was a little different, a little more busy. I did play a good amount of games. I took a week off on vacation for my birthday this year, and we got to play a lot of games. I just didn't record any of them, so sorry, but I do have some news about where you can hear me play other games. If you haven't already listened to the one-shot of The Witch is Dead that I did with the DMs on their stream, it is on both of the podcast feeds if you want some spooky or some silly. It's really more silly than spooky. It's a Grant Howitt one-page one-shot. And the plan is still for my wife and I to release our Star-Crossed House and the Ghost Haunting It one-shot on Halloween itself, so stay tuned for that. But recently, if you recall, a few months ago, I did an interview on my Perspective Checks series with an author of a lit RPG called Clark Rowanson, or C.R. Rowanson, and his book, Spawn Point, the first of at least a trilogy of his lit RPG series, New Eternity, is officially out. You can find it on Amazon at the moment. It is on Kindle Unlimited and things like that, but there are more places you'll be able to get it soon. I think it's just the deal and everything like that is where you're going to get it. Initially is mostly through Amazon, which I know don't love supporting enormous conglomerations and big oligarchy CEOs and BS like that. But try, and if you are interested, support Clark and his book here. And not that long ago, for this book and the release, we did a short series of a TTRPG campaign set in the world of Clark's lit RPG series. It was myself and some other podcasters and performers, Aaron Fours, Ian of Undercommon Tastes, and Barney of StoryComic.com joined Clark, and we played 3 sessions in the New Eternity universe, and we all made characters. I made a tree person. Is anyone surprised? But you can find all of those over on Clark's YouTube channel, The Magic Engineer. I'm going to link it in the description of this podcast so you can go check it out and check out Clark's new book. Keeping the rest of the announcements very short, I honestly have no plans for the month of November. I do know that we're going to be continuing Colossal, and the Perspective Checks interview that I'll be releasing in November is with Craig Hatler, aka Tezrak the Slayer, I believe is his handle on the internet, but a TTRPG designer and UI UX software person. So we talked a lot about how to communicate rules and player aids and things like that in games to get your game's rules across faster and get it at the table and get playing it as smoothly and as quickly as possible, get right to the fun. So hopefully you're going to enjoy that interview. And without further ado, let's talk about this one-player one-shot that I am doing, and it is spooky themed for the month. I'm going to be playing a little game. It's a 4-page game called Spellbook by, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Edaureen Mohammed Noor. It is based on the Lost and Found SRD, and I will link where you can find this game on itch in the description as well, but it is a solo journaling game about playing a sentient spellbook passed down through time from witch to witch. It is very reminiscent of a game I played last year for my holiday one-shots around Christmas time, which was Jason Price's Bucket of Bolts, and you play a sentient ship in that game. In this one, we're going to be playing a sentient spellbook who is aware of the witches that it is moving between hands of, and I've looked at it. It's 4 short pages. It's like so much potential and so many thoughts and things like that jam-packed into 4 pages. It plays pretty much just like Bucket of Bolts, and I'm very excited to make a spellbook. So let's get into it. All right, well, if we're going to be playing a spellbook, the first thing that we need to do is create our spellbook itself. I guess ourselves? We're going to create the spellbook. The game asks a few questions about what you are made of. Is that difficult or easy to find material-wise? Has it been meant to be used as a spellbook from the start? And then a few other questions, but let's tackle those first ones really quick. I recently watched a video of somebody who turned a few egg cartons into pulp. They tore it up, they food processed it, they added water, they sifted it, they used a screen and all that stuff, and they turned it into small sheets of paper. I think that this spellbook is something along those lines. It is very DIY, although I think that it's also probably a mishmash of different things. I think that the covering of it is probably just a simple but finely oiled and cured leather coverlet, and it's just bound with a leather cord. I think that it even is one of those things where it can be wrapped around widthwise the book and then tied off, so it can be carried almost book-shaped, or it can be sort of put in there and then tied around on one of the corners or at the corners, so it's almost like a small bag. And then all of the papers are just inside of it. But the leather covering is simply there to protect the outside. And I imagine the leather itself is probably embossed or pressed with various plants and other shapes and things that are used regularly to help immediate identify things in the field if this witch is doing foraging or anything like that for ingredients for their spells. The actual pages are, like I said, probably handmade, a variety of different types of paper. Maybe there's vellum, maybe there's pulp paper, maybe there's even cloth pages, things like that. And they are hand stitch bound around various twigs and things like that just hold chunks of it together. But I think that at this point there's even multiple different types. And given that there's different sources of paper within it, I imagine they don't always fold left to right and follow a traditional, English reader's book. I think that there are some pages that are going to flip up and down, and others that are going to be so much larger of a piece of paper or cloth that they're folded and need to unfold within the, spread of pages that exists. So it's just kind of a mess, but that's part of the magic of this spellbook, is that depending on what you're looking for, depending on what the spell was and who put it in and when, it's you need to explore it. You need to find what you're looking for, and it might not be as predictable as you'd like or expect. Are those difficult or easy to find materials? Again, I think it varies. I think the primary function of this spellbook is utilitarian, so for the most part it's made of simple basic materials, but there's definitely bound to be a few pages and things like that in there that are made of fine papers or use expensive inks, or maybe even one section of it is bound with a very nice spine or something like that was gifted to the witch for doing something, for casting a spell for some wealthy patron or whatever. Then has it been meant to be used as a spellbook from the start? I think yes and no. I think it's a book of questions by whoever's been holding it, and there are methods and hopefully sometimes, most of the time, solutions to those questions. And in time, those methods and solutions maybe have become rarer or more occult or strange or taboo. And now most of them are what people might call magic, but not all magic is spell work, right? So it might be that there is magic in this book, but was it intended to only hold magic? I don't think so. Lastly, there are some more questions. Are you ornate or simple? We've been over that. I think I'm messily simple. The next question is, are you meant to be shown off or seem unassuming? I think completely unassuming, right? We said that it can be either just a leather wrapped bunch of papers or even held like a bag. So I think that nobody's looking at it and saying, this is a great tome, maybe valuable or anything like that. It's kind of just a crazy journal. Then we have, do your spells share a particular characteristic, or are you a specialized tome or general collection? We've been over that. Very general collection. Lots of questions pertaining to all kinds of things, so certainly not specialist. And then how do your spells affect your attitude towards magic? Ooh, our attitude as a spellbook. That's an interesting question. The spellbook itself regards the magic within it to be, there's always a use for it, right? They view magic as, maybe this one was dangerous. Maybe this one did require a lot of pain and loss and trial and tribulation and failure. And maybe the costs of that spell, if ever needing to be cast again, are going to be pretty steep. There is a use for it. There's always a time where something might be appropriate, as terrible as that may be. The spellbook itself is very pragmatic. And it says, if you like, choose 3 adjectives as traits to describe yourself. Oh, that's great. So yeah, I think pragmatic. I think jumbled, honestly, as an adjective to describe this spellbook. I think that it knows that it is not the most organized. And then curious, because like we said before, it wasn't always just a spellbook where very neatly after the fact spells are transcribed into it. I think that it is first and foremost like a journal of questions and the methods by which the answers are attained. And there's probably a lot of unanswered questions in there, which makes it curious. Okay, step 2 is to create your spells. Now, I don't think I actually have to do this yet, because it's when you encounter a witch, and we'll do that when we meet our first witch, but basically there are a number of rolls that need to be made to put a new spell in the spellbook. We're going to determine how many elements are required in it and ingredients, and what element those ingredients are, how many steps there are to cast the spell, right? Different types of instructions and methods and things like that. So I don't think we need to put this in yet. Yeah, it says each new witch will create at least 1 new spell. So yeah, I don't think we're doing that yet. So we move on to creating our first witch. And we're going to do that in Act 1 of 3. Each act, we will have up to 2 witches where we trade hands between them, and then we will move on to the next act. But before we do, there are events that need to be done with each witch, and then rest and reflection between the witches in each act. So there are 4 different witches, or options for different witches in each act. I'm just going to roll a d4 and see which we start with. Who was our first witch? That is a 3, which is the traditionalist. Determined to preserve the old ways before they disappear, what do they fear the most? Well, I think obviously the loss of knowledge, especially things that get passed down by friends and orally and through showing people how to do things, and it becomes this almost ritual or behavior that becomes second nature because it's the way you were taught to do something and it's important you do it that way. But you realize when you haven't taught anybody, or you don't have anybody to immediately pass these things on to, there's no record of this being kept anywhere, and you'd like this to continue on. It is a good way of doing things. It is a positive behavior. It is a good trait or routine or whatever it may be to have. So that's probably why, at least in the beginning, this spellbook is full of various types of paper and cloth and binding and all over the place, because it became an almost late in life obsession to document everything that this witch, this traditionalist, wanted to pass along. And I think that there's a certain number of pages, or there's a certain action that almost brings this spellbook sentience to life, like the intention of creating something built and born to pass this knowledge on is what gives this spellbook life. So I'm gonna roll here. Every time we choose a witch and we are spending time with that witch. We are going to write about the relationship with that witch, how it progresses, how it ends, and how the spellbook is passed to the next witch. It says to just choose 2 events to incorporate into the time together and create a spell whenever one is invoked. So, for this first witch, I think one of these has to be to love and to nurture. That's one of the categories of events. And from within that category, I'm going to choose your witch has taken you on a pilgrimage. Where are you going and why? Describe the journey and the result. Okay, so I've played a fair amount of witch media on this podcast with my Koriko series and a few other one-shots here and there, and I think we're going to pull almost a reverse Koriko, which is when this witch comes of age, they leave and they find a place to practice their craft. Late in this witch's life, as they feel the end, not necessarily on their doorstep, but they've just realized that they've gotten on in years and they've built a good life doing what they do, but now it's kind of that time where affairs need to be put in order and thoughts about the end need to be considered more than just, can't leave things undone. So this traditionalist, this witch, the relationship already is one of love and hope that this book can provide something to whoever it is bestowed upon. There is a respect. That's where the curiosity comes from. That's where the pragmatism comes from. I think that we maybe don't have that understanding yet of the cost of spells, but I think that this witch is going back to where she left from all those years ago. And it's a long journey back to her hometown. And try as she may have to have kept up with what's going on there, a lot of the people she knew when she left are probably no more. She's going just because it's the first home. She's leaving this home and going to the place she left, and the voyage is much harder than she remembers it being in reverse. She was obviously much younger when she made this trip the first time. A lot has changed about the world since she settled down and started her work that she's spent her life doing. And there are tribulations. There are lots of hard moments. This is reflected in the spellbook itself. I think there's probably a moment where she needs to cast a spell for herself or for someone else, and it's not one with no consequences. I don't know what that spell is yet. I kind of want to see what we get when we roll for the spell and see if that can determine maybe what the circumstance was that caused her to have to cast it. So let's go through and figure out how to create a spell. The first thing we do is we're going to roll 2d6 to determine the number of ingredients that our spell is going to have. All right, here goes. 6 ingredients seems pretty high, although I guess that's below average. And then we're going to roll a d6 for each of those ingredients to determine the element, which could inform the specifics of the ingredient itself. So 6 times, here we go. 6d6. We have a 2 and a 5. Those first 2 are earth and water. The second 2 are 3 and 6, so fire and void. And then we have a 5 and a 4. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have an earth element, a fire element, a metal element, 2 water elements, and 1 void element. And there are examples in here of things that might correspond to that element. So for example, void, which is pretty vague and ambiguous, says the airless chill of space, the calm of a resigned heart, things like that. Let's go ahead and figure out what these 6 ingredients might be so we can come up with what that spell might look like a little more. So going in order, I think that the earth element and ingredient is going to be mud pulled from the banks of a river. The fire element will be charcoal pulled from a restoring fire. The metal will be the clasp of a cloak or other garment. The 2 water elements are going to be water coughed from lungs, and water boiled and infused into tea. And the void will be the skip in a heartbeat from fear or surprise. Once the ingredients have been chosen, we need to roll 1 more d6 to determine how many steps there are to the spell. So we're going to roll 1d6, and we get 1. There is just 1 thing you need to combine all 6 of these ingredients, and then we're going to roll a d6 to find out what that is. A 6. Wait and apply. See what we said earlier about how sometimes the magic of this spellbook isn't even a spell or magic? Everything that I just listed as ingredients there was just resuscitation. It's first aid. There was somebody who fell from a bridge crossing a river on this pilgrimage, and the witch rushed to aid this victim, and before they could drown, she performed something to have them cough water up and get them breathing again. And all the rest is some mud, rub some mud on it is an old thing to, apply to wounds. Fire, the charcoal of a restoring fire, a clasp from a cloak wrapped around like a blanket to keep them warm after almost drowning. A tea to keep their body warm and hydrate them again. And that skip in the heartbeat from fear or surprise, not knowing if this is going to take hold. But those who see our witch rush into action and provide every step along the way to save this person from drowning say it's magic. She doesn't stop to correct them. Before we get to our second event, once we've created a spell, it says, how does this new spell affect your character as a spellbook? Does it change any of your traits? I don't think it does. We have pragmatic, curious, and jumbled. I think that this entire experience, the panic of a moment like that, the rush that needs to happen is very jumbled. And as she's flipping through the book to find the herbs to make a tea for this kind of thing, it seems a little scattered. But I don't think it changes any of our traits, but how does it affect our spellbook? I think that this does turn into some kind of spell. I think that there is something to be said of water out, water in, and there's almost a magic to the tea. And I think it makes our spellbook even more curious about the magic latent, inherent, underlying within everything, like just harvesting some leaves and some flowers and things like that. Our second event with our traditionalist is going to be from the to hide and wait category, and it's going to be your witch has hidden you. Why and where? Do you want to be found? I think that our witch has arrived back in her home village, and it is not the village she left. I think not only... I don't want to say that their views on magic are backwards. I don't think that's true at all, but I think that she sees the difference in the respectability and honor the tradition of her craft in this village. When she left, it was a big deal. I mean, it was a staple role in any community. You had your witch. And that's a role she's been filling where she's lived since she left. But here now, it's secondary. It's a niche thing. It's not a huge deal. And she goes around to those who are trying to learn it, practicing, and I think that she finds some of them lacking, some of them doing it for profit over actual care and help, and others who aren't quite ready to inherit this level of spellbook. So what she does is she closes her eyes and she finds a place in her home village that she always went to, and for lack of a better term, it is a place of power. It is a more open place to the potential of magic than others, perhaps. And I think that she finds a hollow or a nook in a tree or something like that, and she's going to place the spellbook there. Because who will find it ideally will have been drawn here by the potential, the power of this place. She leaves the spellbook there with a pat and a tear and hope. Does the spellbook want to be found? Absolutely. But it understands that she wants it to be found by the right person. And I think that means maybe we don't get a second witch in Act 1. Although, from Act 1 to Act 2, the spellbook passes into a coven. So maybe we do. And there's two here that work very well, which is the novice and the seeker. So I'm going to roll just a d6. Even will be novice, and odd will be the seeker. It is a 3, so the seeker is going to find us, still in Act 1. A restless soul looking for something different. What do they want to change? Perfect. Now, every time you leave a witch, you need to roll a d6 and rest, and it tells you how much time passes before being reclaimed. So let's see. I got a 4, which says rest for 45 seconds, and it takes months. After months of sitting in this place of power, in this nook, in this hidden place, I realized why my first traditionalist owner of a witch did not just find someone to hand me off to. And watching those who come and practice and the glimpses I get of the world outside in the village that she came from and what magic is seen as and used for, it changes a little bit. And then, of all people to find me, it's not an apprentice or a novice witch. It is simply someone with such a strong desire to change or claim their fate that it almost warps the world around them. This is not studied, learned magic. This is in the soul. And this person comes to this place drawn by an invisible string, guided by an invisible hand. And the book can almost feel their potential because of their desire to make a name for themselves, to do something, to be something, to change something. And the spellbook is not only curious, it is pragmatic, it is jumbled, and I think the curious part is what maybe gives itself away to this seeker. You want to change something, but you don't know how? I have questions. I have answers. Find me. And the seeker does. What is it they want to change? I don't think I have an answer to that yet. I think we're just going to say their fate. I think that they have been living a life determined by someone else. They've been told what's going to happen and what they're going to do, and they don't want to accept that. So what are the events that are going to happen with this seeker, who is not a practitioner of magic, who is not knowledgeable in the ways of this spellbook? They are simply going to be experiencing this book from a place of raw curiosity and creativity, and it's all going to be new. I'm going to roll a d4 for which category, and then I'm going to roll a second d4 for which event. Here goes. We got a 3, which is to curse and destroy. Oh, interesting. And then I got a 3 again. This actually might be the most appropriate in this category. Your witch tears out a spell from you due to its having an unintended consequence. Fitting for the last thing that we just did on the pilgrimage. And which spell was this and what happened? So I think we're going to create a spell, but then consider it lost for the future. And like we said, this category is to curse and destroy. I don't think that they were so desperate to change their path that they would curse someone, but I think that what they're doing is symbolically destroying their predestined fate imposed upon them by someone else. So let's go ahead and roll up this spell. We're going to roll our 2d6 for how many ingredients it needs. Low roll that time, just 4. Okay, so 4d6 for ingredients. We get 2 6s. Okay, so that's 2 void. That's a tough one. And then 2 2s. Okay, so 2 2s and 2 6s. 2 earth ingredients and 2 void ingredients. Okay, I already have an idea just based on those. Because just earth and void makes me think of almost like a teleportation sort of thing. And I think that maybe there was some kind of spell work in here that did maybe link to places or something like that, that the witch, the traditionalist, had been working on. Maybe for something like, I've moved this plant from where I found it to my cottage, but I know it needs this kind of soil, or I know it needs this kind of thing, and maybe there was like a pot that simulated soil from the bottom of a moving river or something like that, or something like that. It basically replicated something from somewhere else, but it's misinterpreted by this seeker who has no formal training in magic. Oh boy, this is great. Okay, so our 2 earth ingredients are going to be soil, which you have stepped upon, and the other is going to be a lucky 4-leaf clover. And the 2 void ingredients are going to be a scream captured in a bottle and the tension between 2 stairs. And the number of steps to recreate the spell is 6. This is a complicated spell. Not just because of what it's attempting to accomplish. I think that our seeker probably overdoes it, honestly. Not sure what they're doing, so we're going to roll 6d6. Oh, it just says we could choose from this table. There's add, braid, crush, blend, burn, bake, chop, strain, boil, steep, wait, apply. There's a lot of options here. And given that we only have earth and void, I imagine there is quite a bit of adding and crushing and burning and chopping of the soil from under your feet where you have gone, because it's about where you're going. I think there is maybe boiling and steeping and waiting for the lucky clover. The scream is almost like a crush, and the tension between 2 stairs is a wait, or maybe even a boiling, right? A boiling over of anger to that scream. But I think that this person overdoes it. I don't even know if I want to call this second owner a witch, because sure, they're doing magic, but I don't think that they are planning on following in this life, if you will. They want to use this book as a means to an end, and the curiosity of our spellbook got the better of us, and saw someone who had questions, very good questions, very tempting questions to take on and chew and try and solve. But it goes really, really poorly. The Seeker consults this spell and does what they think they need to do to confront whoever's controlling their destiny, and it goes very poorly. They run back to the spell, and I think that the book is eager to know. It's curious. It's saying, hey, did it work? Pragmatically, like, did this achieve the goal, no matter, how painful it looked like it was for you to have to go through all of those things and scream and crush and push and, wait when all you want to do is run. And they don't know. I think that this Seeker left the book behind, and when they come back, they just tear the page out of the spellbook. And if it could be said that it hurts, I think that it's something like that. I think that it's painful to lose something that you may need in the future, to have it torn from you because it was misinterpreted. I think that's the only event we're going to have with this Seeker. I think that, pragmatically speaking, it does work. I think that it does break the destiny, but I think it was worse of a confrontation than they wanted. I think they wanted a clean magic solution to their problem, which was really just an ugly, we need to have a conversation and there's gonna be some fallout from it, right? Like, people having a hard conversation, you need to understand that, what people want aren't always gonna line up. And they wanted that magic perfect solution, and they pretended it was in this book, and it wasn't. And now instead, that magic's gone forever. And I think that further, just to pass between acts here, we're going to say that this Seeker gets rid of us the only way they know how, which is pawning us off, basically. And I think that they sell the book to whoever for whatever. How long do we sit on a shelf before we pass into a coven? Let's find out. Roll a d6. Oh, wow. A 6. Decades. I'm going to sit here for 3 minutes, and we're going to determine how many decades that is. Years in storage, on shelves, in places where people walk by and don't even think or look twice at you. Maybe they look at the strange, there's no words on the spine that say what you are. They just see a collection of strange diagrams and writings and leather, and it looks like a pile of nothing. I think maybe even just after a while, whoever this was sold to says this is never going to sell. They just kind of throw it in a box and leave it on the floor of some place just gathering dust. 10 years later, someone comes and finds this book, and they recognize it for what it is. It is going to be brought back to a coven of witches who are rediscovering magic in a time when, like we said earlier, it used to be a staple of every community. A wise woman, or a wizard, or a witch, or an herbalist, or anything like that. Somebody who plumbed the natural depths of the universe and the world and asked the hard questions and experimented with everything to be found in nature. Now, it's a lost art. It's a strange time for magic. Let's roll a d4 to see which member of the coven finds us first. 4. The Peacemaker. The Peacemaker recognizes the importance of harmony and balance overall. What will they sacrifice for peace? Let's just keep building on that. I think that the society within which this coven finds itself is one where modern, quote-unquote, modern solutions have been found to problems which previously would have been solved by witches and covens and magic folk and things like that. And now there is a lack of harmony. There is an imbalance in the world. These modern solutions are taxing on not just the people, but the world and the wildlife and everything, even inanimate things like the water and the soil and everything. Now, this Peacemaker wants to prove that there is a benefit to harmony, a benefit to maybe taking your time a little more, being a little more patient, and maybe not using the cheapest option or the most convenient option for the one that's going to, in the long term, be better. Not just for you, but for everything around you. Crazy concept, I know. What will they sacrifice for it? I think it's going to be a big sticking point in the coven. That this Peacemaker brings it back to this collection of witches, brings us back as a spellbook and says, look what I found. There is so much in here. We need to begin learning what was lost. We need to show the people what they've forgotten. I think that this witch reinvigorates our spellbook after a decade of sitting and listening and hearing people stop trying to answer questions themselves or personally and accept what they're told is the way and do things because that's what's expected, that's what's convenient. And this witch says we can change things again. And change is a scary word to our spellbook because the last one, the Seeker, wanted change, and we gave them what they asked for, but it didn't work in the way they wanted. But this seems like a better change. I think that this member, the Peacemaker, is going to organize us a little better. I think we're going to lose our jumbled trait, and we're going to gain a different trait, which is going to be experimental. As much as our spellbook can, it's going to attempt to push the members of this coven to answer questions that have not been answered yet, and it's going to just provide various pages that may or may not have the answer, but wants them to explore that through experimentation. Especially in a time when magic's been discounted, it's going to take something big. Let's see what our 1 or 2 events are going to be. I'm going to roll a d4 again just to see. Actually, you know what? I think it's time to fight and protect. And there is an Act 2 only one in here, which I feel like I should just do. And it says, your coven has lost a witch to an outside force. How did it happen? How do you and the coven mourn and or remember and or avenge them? Oh, this is great. I think we are in witch trial times. I think that our coven is attempting to remind people of the importance and the power and the potential of magic. Somebody does not take kindly to a member of the coven going out and brazenly wielding magic, solving a problem they had no right solving. This was between two people. We could have handled it without your intrusion, your corrupt intrusion. It's not quite witch trials level of this, but I think that there was a meddling in a private matter that was, again, we are pragmatic, solved by magic, but it wasn't about the problem being solved. This person was mad that they just did not get their way. And in response, sure, the coven is going to mourn the loss of this witch because that was not an appropriate reaction to their intrusion. Yeah, maybe it was a little bit of a breach of privacy, but it worked. And so the coven sets out to avenge them. and we are going to create a spell through which they defend the honor of this witch. Let's go ahead and roll 2d6 to see how many ingredients. Wow, another low roll, only 4, a 1 and a 3. So let's see what the ingredients are. We get a 6 and a 3, which is fire, and we can't get away from void. And a 2 and a 5. So we have earth, fire, water, void. Okay. The earth ingredient is a gem of some kind, a conduit of power. The fire element is a vigil candle, lit in honor and memory of the lost. The water element are tears shed over the loss of a friend, and the void is the memory of that friend, knowing there will be no more. The gem of the conduit amplifies this loss, this pain, this absence, and projects it upon the person who went to these lengths to kill a witch because they did not get what they wanted. And now they will understand the loss that they inflicted upon the world. And in a way, that was what this coven needed. And the reaction by the public, I think, reminds them that you don't cross a witch. However, our witch is the peacemaker, and I think that this went against everything they were voting for. Because now they have not made peace with the rest of the community and the world. They have effectively picked a fight. And now we are going to have to choose another event. I'm going to go with back to hide and to wait as the category. And we're going to go with the first one, which says your witch is in hiding from an enemy intent on their destruction. What steps do you take to flee and obscure your escape? Do you succeed? This is the locals not putting up with the witches, because it's a fair fight when two people without magic want to settle the score. You know, in a way, right? Quote unquote fair fight. But magic is not fair. Not everyone has access to it, and the locals begin raising their pitchforks and torches, and now we are approaching that bad relationship. And I think that the coven has to disband with plans to group back up, but they are fleeing into the night, on the run, scattering to throw off the scent and make it harder for the witches to be caught. And our witch, the peacemaker, all she wants is to try and make things better, but she understands that this is not the time or maybe place to do it. I think that the witch casts a spell to shroud the escape. Let's see what that spell is. That is a 12. So there's a lot of ingredients. This was a long time in the making. Maybe this is even something that the entire coven does to cover the escape of everyone. Let's go ahead and roll a ton. I'm going to just skip ahead and you'll hear after I roll and figure out all these ingredients. We have one air ingredient, which will be a black feather. We have 4 fire ingredients, 1/3 of this spell. And I think that this is going to be ash placed upon the forehead of all 4 remaining members of the coven. 2 earth elements are represented by soil from a crossroads and the boughs of a pine tree, which would dampen sound. 1 metal ingredient is going to be quicksilver. And finally, 2 void ingredients, the dark of a night without stars, and the unknown fate of a promise made. And with that, all 4 witches scatter in 4 different directions, fleeing this town. Does our witch succeed? I'm going to roll a d4 to see how many witches get caught. Just 1. But in fleeing, I think our witch is going to have to get rid of our book, because this is a relic or evidence of this witch's coven, which could potentially be traced back to this event. Though she's sad to see it go, it did not achieve the peace she'd hoped for it. I think a lot of our spellbook is enamored with hope and succeeding in answering a question for people, but so far it has not gone well. It is dangerous to practice magic. And I think that our spellbook leaves the coven, and we're going to move to Act 3. Let's roll a d6 to see how long before we are picked back up again. 2. It is all of a few days. Going to Act 3, this is a time to lie. We're going to roll a d4 for potentially our last witch. The Burner. Determined to destroy all that came before, what gives them pause? This is such a fitting bookend from the traditionalist who just was desperate to preserve the old ways before they disappear. Now we have someone who wants to burn it all down. But what will make them pause? What about us, our spellbook? So a few days after the escape, our witch... Oh, you know what? What if our witch is the one who gets caught, and the person who wants to burn it and end it all days later is somebody from the town who does catch this witch? They want all of this drama, all of this to be over. They just want to move on, and maybe they see magic and the witches as remnants of a bygone era which are nothing but trouble. As we've seen, magic does not necessarily solve these people's problems. And you know what? Maybe this person catches our peacemaker witch, member of the coven. Maybe they don't kill her. Maybe they confront her. They catch her in the woods while there's a huge manhunt out for these witches. And this person finds our witch. And the witch says, "Take the book. I don't want it. Do what you will with it. It did not solve our problems. I wanted to make peace. All I wanted was peace. You must believe me." Our peacemaker leaves peacefully in one piece. I'm just going to keep loading on the puns. But they allow them to leave with their life if they promise not to practice again. And this person now holds our spellbook, holds us. And we can feel their intention. It'll all be solved. All they need to do is burn this book. Everything in here must be evil. Everything in here must just make things worse. But what gives them pause? Let's find out. Oh, I have the perfect one. To hide and wait. Our spellbook has an affinity for hope. An affinity for trying to answer questions. It can feel that this new holder, this new owner, the hope that they have does not align with the hope that our spellbook wants to provide. And when they bring this book back, I think that a curiosity in them stays their hand from just being like, here it is, let's burn it and be done with this. And they open the book. I chose the prompt, you decide to erase your pages. Is this temporary or permanent? And what caused this act? This is self-preservation, but also a test. The person who took it from the peacemaker witch opens the book and says, what could be in here that could be so vile, that could lead people down this path, that they would destroy, that they would tamper with the universe in ways to hurt people? And finds nothing but empty pages. Except for maybe one page. Which is just a journal. Which is just the traditionalist. It is a writing about the want, the desire, the need to preserve the old ways. They are important. There is a routine, there is a ritual to it, and there is benefit. There is health in these pages. There is help in these pages. But the spellbook's not going to show this person until they're willing to read it with that intention. And instead of burning it, instead of bringing it to the higher powers within the town, it sits and waits. and occasionally the person comes back, curious. They open it, and every time they do, the spellbook decides to reveal a little bit more, until they've piqued the curiosity, but also portrayed the hope inherent in this book. It has done a fair amount of harm. Admittedly, it has. Not because of what it wanted, not because of what it provided, just because of how humans have complicated it. It's messy, it's complicated, and intentionality, focus, and trust play a huge factor in casting a spell. And I think that we're going to cast one spell with this new person. I think that they're going to take a chance. Eventually, we reveal a page. We've gotten to know this person. Again, not a witch, but not everything in here is magic. A lot of the pages that have been revealed so far are simple things, recipes, herbal teas, things that just help, but you don't need to conjure, you don't need to beckon the spirits or work the elements to your whim. Just little things that prove what is in this book is safe and well-meaning. But then, one day, I think they come and they want an answer. And you know what? Maybe it is a selfish answer. But again, it doesn't matter to our book. We want to give people answers. We want them to explore, experiment, and see just what can be done. And the reason they come so desperate for an answer is because things are bad. We're going to choose the prompt to love and nurture. Your witch casts a spell of blessing on the local crops. What is the result? How does this change the perception of the locals towards witchcraft? Which I think is the perfect ending. Let's make this spell. Rolling 2d6 for ingredients. 6 with 2 3s. And I'll do the usual, let you know after I roll all these ingredients and elements. Crazily enough, for 6 ingredients, we actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so there's 1 ingredient of each element. I almost feel like this is a perfect spell to introduce this person to, as it requires them to understand all of the elements that exist. And I rolled 4 for how many steps there are, and I think that it's pretty straightforward. I think that the air ingredient is going to be a warm gust of wind for the beginning of the growing season. The earth ingredient is going to be a worm, emerging, working the soil. The fire element is going to be the extra minutes of daylight that every increasingly long day provides for the growing season. The metal is going to be some kind of harvesting tool. The water is going to be clean, fresh water from the river to be poured over all of the crops. And then finally, the void element is going to be, you know what? I think it's going to be something like empty silos or places to store the crop once it has grown. Again, the emptiness is a symbolic yearning or beckoning to be filled. The 4 instructions are going to be super simple. It's going to be crushing, adding, chopping, waiting. This spell is almost like an offering. It's a harvest. It is a growing season condensed down to one heavily intentioned effort. And there's almost a wondrous result of this by our curious local who stayed their hand from burning this book as they watch the efforts of their spell, whatever this book has revealed to them. There's a small patch of earth and worm and all of these things, and basically it almost creates this time-lapse version of growth, bloom, senescence, decay, cycle, cycle, cycle. They're not sure what they just did. But over the next few weeks and months, the crops turn around. I don't think this young person takes the credit. I don't think they shout about what they did to maybe bring this on. But I think they continue to secretly practice with only the best intentions and well-meaning. And somewhere in their heart, they know this was what it was always supposed to be about. This is what it always was. And sometimes, if all you can do is good and no one finds out, it's better to have done the good than to lose the opportunity to do it at all. And I think that's the same realization that our spellbook has. It doesn't need to be aggressive in its experimentation. It just needs to stay curious and remember why it's doing what it's doing. Preserve the old ways because there are answers in here. And the best thing you can do is to do good. And I think that's game. We'll answer a few questions. I don't think our look has changed much since the start. I think that we still are just a messy collection of pages bound in leather, hidden away, ready to go on a moment's notice. Scribbles everywhere, jumbled. We're going to go back to jumbled, I think. And if I can add a word or a trait to our spellbook, it's just hopeful. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this one-player one-shot of Spellbook. And if you like what I'm doing, please find me on the social medias or email me at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com. Join the DMs After Dark Discord. It's fun there. I promise we chat about little bits of everything. Games, life, food, pets, video games, you name it. Come hang out. Let's chat. I think that, we're closing in on the end of 2025, which feels crazy. But I hope that you're all doing well despite the world. And I hope that my silly little podcast can provide some just good vibes and or, thoughts, food for thought, some good games that you may not have heard about. And until next time, it's better to do good and no one know about it than to lose the opportunity to do good. So see if you can find an opportunity.